I want to start this video by saying this is the first of what I hope will be more installments of my life in country music. This doesn't come easy for me. I don't like being on camera and I don't particularly care for the sound of my own voice, which is probably the main reason I never followed in my dad's footsteps into radio. But this story does matter to me, and I hope you'll stick with me, so here goes. What can I say about my childhood? I was born out on the dusty prairie of the Texas Panhandle in Amarillo, where the air didn't smell like pine trees or roses. We woke up to the smell of cattle. Cow shit, really, but what else would you expect from the cattle capital of the world? If you've ever heard of the Big Texan Steak Ranch and the 72-ounce steak challenge, it's the real deal. That meat goes straight from their own processing facility to your plate. No middleman, no romance, just Amarillo. What the town lacked in trees, it made up for in cattle, not just in Amarillo, but across the entire Panhandle, a region proudly serviced by the king of country, KZIP Radio, where my dad worked as both a disc jockey and a promoter. He was the guy pushing the artists that Hal Smith Productions, one of Nashville's major agencies at the time, wanted played on the air. He was also the guy responsible for the country music concerts in Amarillo scene in the 70s, which meant he was sometimes responsible for making sure artists like No Show Jones actually made it to the stage sober enough to perform. I saw all of it firsthand on tour buses, backstage at concerts, and sometimes right at our family dinner table. It was a different time, and one I really miss. Most of us were poor and we didn't know any different. Our friends were poor, our families were poor, clothes were something you wore, cars were just transportation. We walked to school. The highlight of the week was the skating rink and hoping the girl you had a secret crush on would be there. Back then, Amarillo was telling the world it was booming. I remember the billboards, big, confident, almost proud. Oil and gas money, defense jobs, trucks rolling in on I-40. The town felt like it was going somewhere. And somewhere in the middle of all that optimism was the Palomino Lounge. That's where my earliest memories begin. They're short and vague, but they're real. Over the years, I've filled in some of the gaps with the help of my older sister and from an article I came across that finally put words to what I remembered. That seems like as good a place to start as any. I was only 3 years old when my parents owned the Palomino Lounge on Fillmore Street in Amarillo. About the only thing I remember are fragments, the griddle and the back room. The back room with the bunk beds, the room where my 5-year-old brother, my 12-year-old sister, and I slept while raucous behavior took place on the other side of the wall. One night, according to my sister, my parents were out partying, and the three of us were alone back there. I still remember the fear we felt when someone tried to break in through the back door to the room where we slept. Fortunately, my parents came home right around that time and ran the would-be burglar off. My dad wasn't the kind of man you wanted to cross paths with back in those days. The Palomino Lounge was no place for children, something I understand far better now than I did back then. My sister shared another story with me recently, the one about Buck Owens and the Buckaroos. Buck was around Amarillo and our house quite a bit back then, and according to her, they decided to do a full gig at the Palomino one night. Not an unplugged set, but a complete show. It got loud, it got rowdy, and the police were called more than once. It's a story I wish I could remember myself, especially given how big a fan of Buck I've become later in life. As you're listening, you're seeing a few pieces from my dad's collection, all original materials from that time. The Capitol Records radio script for Tiger by the Tail, the Wanted promotional posters, and a very rare Brother Light lighter featuring Buck and the Buckaroos. These aren't reproductions, they're artifacts from that era. To close out this segment, I want to share what I've learned about the Palomino Lounge, my second home for a brief time in my early childhood. These aren't my words. They come from an individual named Ron Streetman, who posted an account in a Facebook group dedicated to Amarillo history and memories. What follows is a recap of his recollection. To understand the Palomino Lounge, you have to understand where it sat and what Fillmore Street had become by then. According to Ron Streetman, North Fillmore already felt abandoned in those days. It had once been part of Route 66, carrying people into downtown and back out again. But when Amarillo Boulevard rerouted traffic to the west side, that stretch of Fillmore died. Businesses closed, buildings were torn down or left to rot. What remained were clusters of decaying brick buildings separated by empty lots and wide, uneven sidewalks that nobody walked anymore. The barber shop sat in one of those clusters, a sewing machine repair shop on one end, the barber shop on the other, and the Palomino Lounge was right next door. Ron describes walking past the Palomino as a child, almost afraid to look inside, drawn to it but uneasy. Outside, the Texas sun was blinding. Inside, the room was so dark you could barely make out the end of the bar and the first couple of stools. Behind it, beer signs glowed in every color, like a carnival midway at night. One afternoon, while his dad finished a beer next door, Ron was led inside the Palomino itself. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust. At the bar sat an overly made-up woman with a cigarette voice, leaning too close to another man. She fawned over him as they passed, and he remembers feeling embarrassed and uncomfortable. The place smelled of stale beer, smoke, and something else he couldn't name at the time. Later he realized it was desperation, a place for people who didn't have anywhere else to go. Behind the bar stood a big, burly bartender with tattooed arms and rolled-up sleeves. The wall behind him glowed with beer signs, Schlitz, Coors, Hams, waterfalls flowing in colored light. Off to one side, a lone cowboy played pool, cigarette stuck to his lip, calculating every shot. In the corner, another cowboy angrily worked a pinball machine. Sitting there, Ron remembers thinking how angry his mother would be if she knew he was there, and knowing he would never tell her. She hated places like that. Her younger brother had been one of those people, in and out of jobs, in and out of jail, drunk most of his life, gone too early. When his dad finally finished his beer, Ron was relieved to leave. He didn't go back inside again. If he had to wait near the Palomino after that, he would rather sit on the curb than step through the door. As he put it, he had already seen, as the old song says, a picture from life's other side.